Before you read this story, ask yourself one question. When was the last time a leader said no to power and yes to his people? In a world where presidents chase cameras, fly to foreign lands, and forget the ones who raised them, one man chose to stay behind. This is not just a story. It is a mirror. It is a message. It is a reminder that true leadership is not in speeches or suits, but in standing with your people when no one else will. Read this. Share it. Remember it. Because in times like these, the world needs more no from the proud, and more yes to the poor. That early morning in Burkina Faso, the sun was still rising. The sky was soft orange. Roosters had just finished crowing. The streets were quiet except for the sound of children sweeping in front of their homes and mothers starting fires to cook. Inside a small but strong-looking presidential office, Ibrahim Traoré was already working. His table was not full of gold. It was just wood. His chair was not too soft. He liked it that way. On the table, there were papers everywhere, not papers about himself, but papers about the people. One report said, water pumps in the north are broken. Another said, school attendance is dropping in the villages. Another said, farmers are struggling with old tools. Traoré read all of it with sharp eyes. No smile, no frown. Just focus. He had been up since 5 a.m., not to drink tea, but to work. Then his aide, a young man named Musa, entered quietly with a letter in his hand. Sir, Musa said, bowing slightly. You have received a letter. It came through the embassy. It is from the United States of America. Traoré looked up, but did not move quickly. He gently wiped his fingers on a small cloth and took the envelope. It was thick. It was white. It had gold edges and bold letters. It smelled like perfume and power. He opened it slowly and read. The letter said, Dear President Ibrahim Traoré, we are writing to invite you to Washington, D.C., in the United States of America. You are invited to attend an international conference on African peace, security, and development. We wish to speak with you about important matters, economic growth, democracy, trade, and cooperation. We respect the path your country is taking and your leadership in the Sahel region. We hope you will accept our invitation and join us for a special session with our officials and leaders. Sincerely, United States Delegation. After reading it, Traoré placed the letter on his table and said nothing. Musa waited. Silence filled the room. The fan above spun slowly, pushing hot air around. Outside the window, you could hear the call to morning prayer. So? Musa asked. Will you go? Traoré still did not speak. He stood up and walked to the window. From there, he saw a group of boys walking barefoot on the dusty road. They were laughing, wearing torn shirts, carrying school bags made out of old rice sacks. They were on their way to school. He looked further and saw women drawing water from a deep, cracked well. The sun was already burning their backs, but they kept working. He saw soldiers changing shift at the gate, tired, dusty, but alert. He turned around and faced Musa. He did not look angry. He looked like a man with a heavy heart. A heart that had no time for noise. Musa, he said. Do you know why they want me in America? Musa paused. To talk about peace. To talk about Africa. To sit with other leaders, sir. Traoré nodded slowly. Will they bring water to our dry land? Musa said nothing. Will they fix the broken schools in the east? Musa remained silent. Will they remove the fear from the eyes of our farmers in the bush? Still no answer. Traoré walked back to his table. He picked up the letter again, not to read it, but just to look at it. He smiled, not because he was happy, but the kind of smile that comes from knowing the truth. They want to talk about Africa without Africa, he said. They want to talk about our hunger while eating steak. They want to talk about peace while selling guns. He paused. Musa, we are not yet ready to leave this land, not for gold, not for praise, not even for fine words. The letter from the United States sat on the desk all morning. Clean. Polished. Full of big promises. But President Ibrahim Traoré did not look at it again. He had already read it once. That was enough. He had more important things to do that day. He met with local farmers who had traveled for 5 hours just to tell him their wells had dried up. He sat with a group of school teachers from the countryside who had no chalk, no desks, and no roofs over their classrooms. He heard from mothers whose children had not been vaccinated because the clinic was too far and the nurses were too few. Traoré listened. Not just with his ears, but with his heart. Every time he heard a problem, he would write it down. He didn't promise gold. He didn't say, we are working on it like other leaders used to. He would look each person in the eye and say, we will fix it, little by little. Stay with me. That same evening, after the sun had gone down, after the last soldier had left the hallway and the generator had hummed to life, he sat down at his desk again. This time, it was not to read reports. This time, it was to write a reply. He lit a simple lamp. No bright chandeliers. No golden lights. Just a desk, a chair, a pen, and the quiet voice of a man who carried his country like a burden on his back. He took out clean paper. Musa, his young aide, stood nearby. I don't want this typed, Traoré said. I will write it with my own hands. Let them feel the weight of my words. Musa nodded. Yes, sir. The fan turned slowly above them. The night air was heavy but silent. Traoré picked up his black pen and began to write. Slowly. Firmly. From the heart. The letter said. To the leaders of the United States. Thank you for your invitation. I see the respect in your words. I feel the weight of your interest in Africa. And I do not reject your message lightly. But I must tell you the truth. I cannot come. Not now. Not at this moment. Because my hands are full. My heart is heavy. My people need me. Our villages are still too quiet. Not because they are at peace, but because they are tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of hoping. We still fetch water from broken pumps. We still learn under mango trees. We still bury our dreams beside dry rivers. I know you want to talk about peace. But we are still fighting for food. I know you want to talk about democracy. But our children still sleep on cold floors. If I leave now, even for 1 week, who will walk through the farms? Who will visit the clinics? Who will answer the cries of the old woman waiting for medicine? I am not against friendship. I am not against talks. But I believe the best message I can give the world is not in Washington, it is right here, on the soil of my fathers. One day, I will come. One day, I will speak. But I must come as a man who has built. A man whose hands are clean, not from rest, but from hard work. Until then, I remain here. Not because I am afraid. Not because I am angry. But because I am working. With respect. Captain Ibrahim Traoré. When he finished writing, he handed the letter to Musa. Musa held it like something sacred. He looked at his president and said, "This will surprise many people, sir." Traoré smiled gently and said, "Let it surprise them. Let it teach them that true power is not in being invited. It is in knowing when to say no." Musa nodded slowly. He walked out of the room holding the letter with both hands, like it was a baby. As soon as the letter was sent, news began to spread. A whisper here. A quiet shock there. A journalist in Ouagadougou got the information and posted. Breaking, President Traoré has turned down a US invitation. People didn't believe it at first. Some said, it's a lie. Others said, no president would ever do that. But the truth came out. The reply was real. The signature was real. The reason was honest. No drama. No insults. Just a firm "not now." Some diplomats in the West frowned. What kind of African leader says no to us, they asked in their offices. But back in Burkina Faso, something else was happening. The markets were full of murmurs. Old women selling vegetables said, "This one is different. This one does not run to white men." A young carpenter said to his friends, "If he can say no to them, then maybe he can say no to corruption too." Even the soldiers guarding the gates of the palace stood taller that night. And in homes all across the country, from the big cities to the small dusty villages, fathers leaned close to their sons and said, "Listen to this story. One day you'll understand its power." Because for the first time in a long time, people felt seen. Not because their president traveled, but because he stayed. By the next morning, the news had reached every corner of Burkina Faso. From the tall buildings in Ouagadougou to the small huts in the dry villages of the north, everybody was talking about it. President Traoré said no to the United States. The sentence moved like wind through the country. Some whispered it. Others shouted it. But everyone heard it. At the radio station in Bobo Dioulasso, the newsreader was almost shaking as he spoke. "This just in. President Ibrahim Traoré has turned down an official invitation from the United States. He said he is too busy working for the people of Burkina Faso." He read part of the president's letter on air. After he finished, there was silence in the studio. Then the producer behind the glass clapped softly. The man on the mic wiped his eyes. At a school in Koudougou, a teacher read the letter aloud to her class. She stood in front of 20 children, some without shoes, all listening closely. When she finished reading, one little girl raised her hand and asked, "Madam, does that mean he loves us?" The teacher smiled gently and said, "Yes, Awa. It means he chose us first." The children clapped. One boy stood up and said proudly, "When I grow up, I want to be like Traoré." The classroom was not fancy. The blackboard had cracks. The benches were old. But the hearts inside were full of light that day. In the countryside, a group of farmers heard the news from a boy who came running from town. He was out of breath when he arrived. "The president said no to the Americans," he shouted. "He said he must stay here to fix our problems." At first, the men didn't believe him. One old farmer said, "You lie? That is too bold." But the boy pulled out a folded newspaper. They gathered around. The old man adjusted his glasses and read the lines slowly, word by word. When he finished, he looked at the others and said, "This one is real. I can feel it." The men raised their hands to the sky and gave thanks. At last, one said, "We have a leader who drinks the same water as us." In the market, women stopped to talk about it between selling tomatoes and onions. "He did not go to enjoy air condition," one said. "He stayed here in the heat with us." Another woman added. Others ran away to conferences. "This one walks the streets." And just like that, something small but powerful began to grow in the hearts of the people, something called trust. Meanwhile, in fancy offices far away, some world leaders were confused. "Why did he reject us?" one asked. "Is he trying to insult us?" A diplomat from Europe replied, "No, it's not an insult. It's a message." "What message?" "That not all African leaders are waiting for approval anymore. Some are building without us watching." They didn't like the sound of that. Back in Burkina Faso, President Traoré went on with his day. He didn't give speeches. He didn't call press conferences. He didn't brag. He just got into his dusty car and drove to a small village where a clinic had no nurses. When he arrived, the children looked at him with big eyes. They didn't believe he was real. A nurse ran outside. "President," she asked. "Yes," he said. "I heard you have problems here." She nodded quickly, still shocked. Traoré entered the small building. He saw the empty shelves. He saw the broken beds. He saw a mother fanning her sick child with a piece of cardboard. He bent down beside the child and said, "You are the reason I stayed." That night, he returned to the presidential residence. It was quiet. The guard saluted as he entered. But he didn't walk proud like a king. He walked like a man who had carried bricks all day. In his room, he didn't sit in front of a big TV. He didn't eat from a golden plate. He ate from a steel plate with beans and yam. Alone. In silence. Musa, his aide, entered. "Sir," he said, "the world is still talking about your decision. Social media is full. Some are angry. Some are proud. But all are watching." Traoré looked up and smiled faintly. "Let them watch. Let them know we are building something new, not for show, but for the future." Musa hesitated, then asked, "Sir, do you regret not going?" Traoré shook his head slowly. "I would only regret it if I left while my people were still suffering. This seat is not for decoration. It is a tool. A duty." Musa nodded and stepped back. Before leaving the room, he asked, "Sir, how will the world know what you are doing here if you don't go and tell them?" Traoré answered softly, "They will know through the sound of clean water, the sight of full classrooms, the joy of healed children. That is the only speech I want to give." That night, a storm came. The rain hit the roof hard. The winds blew loud. But inside many homes across Burkina Faso, people slept peacefully. Because they knew something new had started. Not a revolution with guns. Not a protest with signs. But a quiet fire in the heart of one man and the millions who followed him. And in a small village, deep in the dry north, a boy took a stick and wrote in the sand, "Our president stays." No one taught him those words. But somehow, he understood. And that was enough.